city of Woburn has the dubious distinction of having more cancer than any other city in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
It is the year 1982, and after 8 long years of tragedy in the small city of Woburn, Massachusetts, the time has finally come for Ann Anderson and 7 other families to campaign for justice. Leading the case is attorney Jan Schlickman. This lawsuit was about the Woburn Cancer Cluster, an outbreak of cancer that occurred in Woburn. This tragic event that began in 1973 concluded with a triumphant victory over W.R. Grace & Company, the owner of a cryovac plant which used to be located at 369 Washington Street, Woburn, Massachusetts, along the Aberjona River. This was also the first time that the residents pursued a lawsuit against the polluters. The tragedy started when a very worried mother, Ann Anderson, found out that her son Jimmy, who was just 3.5 years old, received a phone call from her son's pediatrician, Dr. Donald McLean. There appears to be a problem with your son's blood. After Jimmy's diagnosis, Ann went on a search for reasons why her son got sick. She went through public medical records and discovered a recurring diagnosis of strange cancers, including lymphocytic leukemia. With the help of Reverend Bruce Young, Ann noticed that the Alfiero, Kane, Robbins, and Toomey families had also been affected by the very same disease as her son. They happened to all live close together and drink from the same water source, Wells G&H.
And then a few streets over, another child was diagnosed. The very next street, another child was diagnosed.
Wells G&H were located near the old Riley Tannery. Many other commercial tanneries existed there in the past, which is why the Woburn mascot is the Tanners. Their first tannery opened in 1648, but the tanning and shoemaking industry skyrocketed in the 1800s. From the 1850s onward, various tanneries and companies began dumping wastes into depressions and swamps. The land became known as the Industriplex Superfund site. For years, local residents claimed the site smelled of rotten decay caused by the waste. They were calling the town to file complaints.
If I was making mashed potatoes, boiling the potatoes, a scum formed on the top. And little things like that made you wonder what was going on.
They even formed a citizens' actions group called FACE, for a cleaner environment.
A meeting of the local environmental group, formed like so many across the country in response to concerns about toxic waste. This is FACE, for a cleaner environment.
In 1979, the Woburn Times, a local newspaper, reported that 184 buried barrels of hazardous chemicals were discovered near the G&H wells, where Woburn residents got their drinking water. The barrels were found on the land owned by Beatrice Foods, who had bought the Riley Tannery in 1978. Northeast of the wells was the W.R. Grace plant, which produced cryovac. Cryovac is a plastic shrink film used to preserve mostly meat and poultry. Overall, the Andersons and the other victims thought that the chemicals from the plants and tanneries were improperly disposed into the Aberjona River and soil, contaminating the groundwater. Even though the well closed in 1979, this tragic oversight likely caused the leukemia cluster in Woburn.
As soon as those wells were turned off, as soon as people began to realize that there was a problem and they stopped using the water, the illnesses stopped.
In 1979, when the EPA began testing soil and water after the Woburn Times report, they found some of the waste was found to contain TCE, which can affect the nervous system, heart, respiratory system, liver, kidneys, blood, and immune system when exposed for a short amount of time. EPA put Woburn on its high priority list, known as the Superfund. Out of the 418 sites in the U.S., Woburn's wells are ranked 39th. Andersons first contacted Jan Schlickman in 1980. He was chosen because he specialized in malpractice and product liability.
I was, touched by the family's story. Who wouldn't be? They had worked so hard. The tragedy was so overwhelming, and they wanted to get answers to their questions. So they challenged me as a lawyer. So I also thought, well, if I'm successful, that would further my career.
He was later joined by Charles Nesson. They filed a lawsuit in May of 1982 against W.R. Grace. The plaintiffs included the Anderson family, the Robbins family, the Toomey family, and the Alfiero family. They claimed emotional distress, physical injury, and wrongful death. They sued for pecuniary gain in order to prevent future incidents. However, Jimmy Anderson had already died in 1981, as had Robbie Robbins. The case was assigned to Judge Walter J. Skinner. With the official name being Anderson versus W.R. Grace & Co., Judge Skinner split the trial into 4 main parts. The first phase handled the contamination. The next 2 parts covered the health effects the chemicals had on the residents of Woburn. The fourth and final part addressed the damages and cleanup. Phase 1 began in 1986. The plaintiffs had to prove that the companies were responsible for the pollution. Were the chemicals illegally dumped? Did these dumped chemicals match up with the ones found in the EPA's report on the wells? Could these toxic chemicals have traveled from the properties to Woburn's groundwater? The Andersons, along with the other families, demanded an $8 million settlement from W.R. Grace. The beginning of the trial saw national attention. It was presented on 60 Minutes and Nightline. The defense was led by William Cheeseman, Jerome Thatcher, and Michael Keating. The judge's decision to delay the medical portion helped the defense. If the jury was unable to find a connection between the pollution and the leukemia, the trial would not go on to the second stage, meaning the families would never appear in court. The defense felt if they would lose their case if the parents testified about the suffering and death of their children. After opening statements, one of the witnesses, geologist John Drabinski, said he had tested the soil and trees, and they were found to contain overwhelming amounts of TCE. It became clear to Drabinski that the site had been polluted for at least 25 years. Additionally, a geophysical expert named George Pinder discovered that large amounts of TCE were found underground, which seemed to be coming from the land of W.R. Grace and Beatrice Foods.
However, there was still much arguing between both sides of the case. In July 1986, the jury gave their verdict. They said there was not enough evidence against Beatrice Foods, but W.R. Grace was responsible for the pollution. Yet, it was hard to tell when the pollution had started and who was to blame. The families had won their $8 million settlement minus legal fees, but the case had not ended yet. In 1987, an appeal was filed by Schlitman. However, the Court of Appeals ruled against the plaintiffs. Nevertheless, in July 1991, the EPA finalized a nearly $70 million settlement to clean up the area. 5 responsible parties were made to pay for the Wells G&H Superfund cleanup site, which was to take over 50 years. Additionally, during the height of the trial in 1986, the U.S. government passed a law stating all large industries must send in annual reports to the EPA where information was made public. The personal settlement, EPA cleanup, and the new law were all triumphs for the residents of Woburn. Is Woburn more of a triumph or a tragedy? One tragic triumph might be the increased awareness of cancer clusters.
Other cancer clusters that have been reported in many places around the world include Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, nearby Wilmington, Massachusetts, Fallon, Nevada, Clyde, Ohio, Shannon, Quebec, and East Yorkshire, United Kingdom. Woburn's impact must also include the 1995 publication of Jonathan Harr's book, A Civil Action. In 1996, it was turned into a movie starring John Travolta. This book and movie is following lead attorney Jan Schlitman in his journey with the families and throughout the court case against W.R. Grace. Sadly, however, in 2011, 30 years after the court case, the site is still contaminated despite an additional $21 million cleanup that continues today. To conclude, Jan Schlitman, Ann Anderson, and the 7 other families won part of the case in 1986, getting a settlement and closing the W.R. Grace factory in Woburn. The factory closing can be seen as a triumph for Woburn and for raising awareness of environmental hazards in the U.S. In fact, TCE is now considered a Category 1 human hazard. Lastly, the idea that regular residents can take on a large company and make them face the consequences of their negligent actions can also be attributed to the brave families in Woburn, Massachusetts. All of those are triumphs that emerged from the tragic Woburn Cancer Cluster.
Certainly, people's consciousness was raised about the dangers of industrial pollutants being dumped.
Oh, I think you can never buy a life. You can never pay for a life.
Real reason you do it is because it gives you inner satisfaction to do something, to be creative, to leave your mark on the world that is perhaps leaves it a little better than when you found it. And that's the greatest satisfaction of all, better than all the prizes in the world.
But I wish he was still here. He was adorable. I'll show you some pictures. He was a beautiful little redhead.